She was once a woman who walked into tall glass buildings with her head held high and her name whispered with admiration. Everyone knew her as the brilliant CEO who had built a company from the ground up. Her employees respected her, investors praised her, and the media called her a visionary leader. For years, she had lived the kind of life many only dreamed of. Her mornings started with meetings in sleek conference rooms, her afternoons filled with decisions worth millions, and her nights often ended at charity galas where cameras flashed and her smile sparkled for the world to see. But beneath all the glamour and strength she showed, she carried the heavy weight of responsibility. Success was not just an achievement for her, it had become her identity. She was not just a mother, not just a woman, she was the CEO. People didn't greet her by her first name anymore, they called her madam or boss. At first, she enjoyed it, but slowly, it became a cage. She had to keep proving herself again and again, as if one mistake would erase all the years she had worked so hard. The downfall didn't come suddenly. It started with whispers. A few numbers on reports didn't add up. There were shifts in the market, rumors about her competitors making moves, and shareholders demanding faster growth. She worked harder than ever, often staying in the office until midnight. Her daughter, waiting at home with homework and bedtime stories, would sometimes fall asleep without seeing her. She promised herself that all the sacrifices would one day be worth it, that one day her child would understand why her mother spent so much time away. Then, like a storm no one could control, everything collapsed. An economic downturn hit harder than expected. A trusted partner turned out to be dishonest. One bad headline became 10, and soon the media that once called her a visionary now labeled her as careless. Investors pulled away. Clients walked out. Employees she had mentored for years began to resign, each one leaving her more isolated. She fought desperately. She tried to save the company, selling assets, cutting costs, even reaching out to people who once begged for her attention. But when money and power vanish, so do the friends who were only there for the shine. Her calls went unanswered, her messages ignored. Within months, the empire she had built brick by brick crumbled into dust. The day the board asked her to step down, she walked out of her office carrying nothing but a small box with a photo frame, a pen her daughter had given her, and a notebook filled with plans that would never see the light of day. Her expensive suit could not hide the tremble in her hands. As the elevator doors closed, she saw her reflection, tired eyes, pale face, and a woman who no longer looked like the one on magazine covers. She had always been prepared for challenges, but she had never imagined losing everything at once. The days after felt unreal. The mansion that once echoed with laughter and important guests became quiet. The cars in her garage felt useless, each one a reminder of the life she no longer belonged to. She avoided social gatherings because she knew the whispers would sting more than open insults. Once people admired her confidence, now they pitied her or secretly celebrated her fall. In the silence of her home, she broke down. She thought of all the sacrifices she had made, the late nights, the missed birthdays, the hugs she couldn't give her daughter because she was busy writing emails or signing contracts. If all of that ended like this, what was the point? Her mind replayed every decision, every warning she ignored, every chance she might have had to prevent the collapse. But the past cannot be rewritten, and regret became her closest companion. Still, life didn't stop. Bills still came. Her daughter still needed school, food, and care. She sold off her mansion and moved into a smaller house, one with creaky wooden floors and a kitchen too small for the memories she carried. For the first time in years, she had no assistants, no drivers, no security guards. She was just another woman walking through life, carrying groceries, waiting in lines, and trying to blend in with the world she had once looked at from above. But it was not the loss of money that hurt her most, it was the loss of meaning. She woke up each day not knowing what her purpose was anymore. She had always believed she was strong, but now, even getting out of bed felt heavy. When she looked at her daughter, she tried to smile, but the guilt in her heart made her eyes wet. She thought she had ruined not just her own life but also her child's. One cold evening, her car broke down on the way home from her daughter's school. She pulled over near a small repair shop on the side of the road. Her once luxury vehicle, a reminder of her past status, now looked out of place among the simple cars parked there. She stepped out, feeling the chill in the air and the heavier chill in her soul. She had been holding herself together for weeks, trying to show strength, but at that moment, standing beside her broken car, she couldn't hold it anymore. Tears rolled down her cheeks silently, and then louder sobs followed. The mechanic, a man with oil-stained hands and a gentle face, noticed her. He didn't rush over, didn't ask questions right away. He just watched, giving her the space to let it out. For years, no one had truly seen her pain, people only saw her power. But now, this stranger saw the truth she had hidden from the world. She was broken, not because of the car, but because life itself had stalled in front of her. The days after her company's fall felt like walking through endless fog. She had once been the kind of woman who gave orders, signed contracts, and made decisions that changed people's lives. Now, she struggled with the simplest things. Even choosing what to cook for dinner seemed heavy because her mind never stopped reminding her of the life she had lost. Every object in her small house whispered about the past. The fancy dresses in her closet hung untouched, mocking her new reality. The framed newspaper articles praising her achievements were now covered with dust, too painful to look at. She often sat alone at the kitchen table, staring at bills. They weren't massive compared to what she used to handle, but now they seemed enormous because she had no steady income. She had savings, yes, but savings only shrink with time, and the fear of the future haunted her every night. How long could she keep going before even that ran out? She worried not for herself but for her daughter. She didn't want the child to grow up feeling the weight of her mother's failures. Her daughter, innocent and hopeful, didn't fully understand what was happening. She asked simple questions like, "Why did we leave our big house?" or "Why don't you go to your office anymore?" The mother forced a smile each time, replying with soft words like, "We just needed a change," or "Mommy is taking a little break." But deep inside, her heart broke with every answer. Children could sense the truth even if they didn't know the details, and she feared that one day her daughter would resent her for losing everything. One afternoon, she tried looking for work again. She dressed neatly and carried her resume, which once had been her greatest pride. The paper carried her story: founder, CEO, leader of hundreds, recognized globally. She thought that surely someone would see her value. But as she sat in front of interviewers, she noticed something strange. The same experience that once made her admired now intimidated people. They asked polite questions, but their eyes showed doubt. Why would a woman who once controlled millions of dollars want to work in an ordinary office? Was she desperate? Was she trustworthy? By the end of the day, she realized that her old title was not opening doors anymore, it was closing them. She went home with her heart heavier than before. Her daughter greeted her with a hug at the door, excited to show her a drawing she had made in school. The picture was simple: two stick figures holding hands, one taller, one shorter, with bright colors around them. At the bottom, the child had written, "Me and Mommy." The woman smiled and praised her little girl, but later that night, while the child slept, she held the drawing and cried quietly. That little piece of paper was worth more than any contract she had ever signed. But still, she couldn't silence the voice inside her that whispered, "You failed. You lost it all." A few weeks later came the night that changed everything. She had picked up her daughter from school and was driving home when the car suddenly made a strange noise. It slowed down and stopped on a quiet street. She tried to restart it, but nothing worked. The child sat in the back seat, confused but calm, asking if everything was all right. She forced another smile and said yes, but deep down she felt like the universe was reminding her of her broken state. Even the car she once proudly drove didn't want to move forward anymore. She called for roadside help, but they said it would take hours. Not wanting her daughter to wait in the cold, she noticed a small repair shop nearby. Its lights glowed warmly against the dark evening. She decided to walk there with her daughter. Inside, the smell of oil and metal filled the air, and the sound of tools clinking echoed from the back. A man in simple clothes, his hands covered in grease, looked up as she entered. He was not like the people she once did business with: no suit, no tie, no polished shoes. Just an ordinary mechanic who worked with his hands all day. He greeted her kindly and asked what happened. She explained about the car, and he nodded, saying he would take a look. As he walked out to inspect the vehicle, she sat on a wooden bench with her daughter. For the first time in months, she couldn't hold herself together anymore. The stress, the shame, the loneliness, it all burst out. She covered her face and sobbed, her shoulders shaking. Her daughter placed a small hand on her arm, whispering, "It's okay, Mommy." Those words, so pure, made her cry even more. The mechanic returned after a few minutes, wiping his hands with a cloth. He saw her tears and paused. Most people would have felt awkward or tried to leave, but he simply stood there for a moment, then quietly said, "Sometimes life stops us in the middle of the road so we can rest." His voice was calm, without judgment. It surprised her. She didn't expect wisdom from a stranger in a workshop. She shook her head, tears still falling. "You don't understand," she said softly. "I lost everything. My company, my money, my name. I used to be someone, and now I'm nothing." Her voice cracked on the last word. The mechanic sat down on a chair across from her, not too close, not too far. He looked at her with steady eyes, the kind of eyes that had seen struggles but also patience. He didn't rush to speak. Finally, he said, "Maybe you think you lost everything. But you didn't." She frowned through her tears, confused by his words. "What do you mean? Look at me. I had everything, and now I'm sitting here with nothing left." The mechanic pointed gently toward her daughter, who was sitting beside her, trying to comfort her with small hugs. "You still have her," he said simply. The words cut through her heart like a gentle light in the darkest tunnel. She turned her head to look at her daughter, really look at her. The child smiled, her innocent face glowing with love and trust. In that moment, the CEO who had lost her company realized she hadn't lost the most important thing in her life. She still had her daughter, her greatest treasure, her reason to keep moving. Her tears didn't stop, but they changed. They were no longer just tears of pain, they were tears of awakening. For months she had believed she was worthless without her title, without her company, without her wealth. But this simple mechanic, with words so plain and honest, reminded her of the truth she had buried under success. She was still a mother. She was still loved. She was still needed. That night, something inside her shifted. The road ahead was still uncertain, but for the first time, she felt a spark of strength. Maybe life wasn't about the empire she had lost. Maybe it was about the little hand holding hers, and the love that could never be taken away. That night after leaving the repair shop, she could not forget the mechanic's words. They echoed in her heart again and again, "You still have her." It sounded so simple, almost too simple, yet it held a truth she had overlooked. For months, she had measured her worth only by the company she had lost, the title taken away, and the fortune that disappeared. She had been blind to the one thing that truly mattered: her daughter. As they drove home in the fixed car, her daughter sang softly in the back seat, a song she had learned at school. The melody was innocent and cheerful, filling the silence with warmth. The woman glanced through the rearview mirror and saw the child's little face glowing with joy. That was when she realized that the mechanic had opened her eyes. She had been crying over things she could never get back, but she had ignored the treasure still sitting right behind her every day. At home, she tucked her daughter into bed and sat beside her for a long time, just watching her sleep. For the first time in months, she felt a strange kind of peace. She remembered the years when her daughter was younger, how the little girl would run into her arms whenever she returned from work, how she used to giggle over bedtime stories, and how her hugs felt like magic. Somewhere along the way, while chasing power and wealth, she had allowed herself to miss many of those moments. She whispered to herself, "I still have her. That's enough to start again." The next morning felt different. She woke up not with dread but with a quiet determination. Life had taken her crown, but life had also left her with a gift greater than any crown: her daughter's love. She decided that no matter what came next, she would no longer let despair control her. She would not let her daughter see her broken forever. She would rebuild, maybe not the same empire, but at least a stable and loving home. She started with small things. Instead of sitting in silence at the kitchen table, she cooked breakfast with her daughter. They laughed when the toast burned, they danced to silly songs on the radio, and the house, though small, felt brighter than it had in a long time. Her daughter noticed the change. The sadness in her mother's eyes was still there, but it was softer now, replaced by a spark of life. Later that week, she returned to the mechanic's shop, not because her car needed fixing, but because she wanted to say thank you. She brought a small box of homemade cookies, baked clumsily with her daughter's help. The mechanic was surprised but smiled kindly when she handed it to him. "You didn't have to," he said. She replied softly, "Yes, I did. You reminded me of something important." He nodded, not pressing further, as if he knew some lessons needed no explanation. The woman slowly began to open her heart to change. She stopped chasing jobs that rejected her and instead looked for opportunities where she could use her skills without hiding her story. At first, it was not easy. She faced doors closing, people doubting her, and old acquaintances avoiding her. But she no longer saw those as the end of her road. Each rejection only reminded her that she was walking a new path, one that didn't depend on titles or grand offices. One evening, she was helping her daughter with homework when the child asked, "Mommy, are you happy now?" The question caught her off guard. She smiled and hugged her daughter tightly. "I'm happier than before," she whispered. And it was true. She might not have had the riches or the status anymore, but she had moments that were priceless. She had laughter at the dinner table, warm hugs at bedtime, and mornings filled with small joys. Her friendship with the mechanic grew slowly too. Whenever her car needed a little checkup, she would visit his shop. He was always calm, always steady, never rushing her, never judging her. Sometimes they shared short conversations about life, sometimes just silence with a smile. He never treated her like a fallen CEO or a pitiful woman, he treated her like a human being. That respect healed parts of her she didn't even know were broken. One day, as she sat at the shop waiting for her car, she asked him, "How did you know what to say that night?" He shrugged and replied, "Life teaches us to look at what we still have, not just what we've lost. I've seen people lose everything, but those who keep love in their hearts never truly fall." His words stayed with her. She realized that strength didn't always come from power or wealth, it often came from ordinary people who lived simply but understood deeply. Slowly, she began to rebuild herself. She started small projects from home, using the skills she had learned as a leader, but this time on her own terms. She no longer aimed to create an empire, instead, she wanted to create something meaningful that allowed her to be present for her daughter. Clients came slowly, but they came because they trusted her honesty, not her title. Every step forward felt earned, not given by power, and that gave her a quiet pride. Her daughter noticed the difference too. The little girl no longer asked why they left the big house or why her mother didn't go to the office. Instead, she began saying things like, "I love our home, and I love when you're here with me." Those words filled the woman's heart more than any award she had ever received. Even though the world had seen her as a fallen CEO, she no longer saw herself that way. She saw herself as a mother, a survivor, and a woman who had learned the meaning of true wealth. All because one mechanic, with simple words, had shown her the value she still carried. And so, her nights of endless tears slowly turned into nights of gentle sleep. Her mornings of dread turned into mornings of gratitude. She had lost everything she thought defined her, but in losing those things, she had discovered what truly mattered. She had her daughter, she had love, and she had a chance to start again. The words of the mechanic never left her. You still have her. They were simple, almost ordinary, but they carried a truth that kept unfolding in her heart every single day. She began to notice things she once overlooked: the way her daughter's laughter filled the room, the little notes she left on the fridge, the hugs she gave so freely. Each of these small things became treasures, more valuable than all the wealth she had once guarded so carefully. The bond between mother and daughter grew stronger as days turned into weeks. They shared dinners at their small wooden table, meals that were modest but filled with warmth. Sometimes, they cooked together, spilling flour on the counters and laughing when the food didn't turn out perfect. Her daughter would remind her, "It's still yummy, Mommy," and those words carried more comfort than any chef's review or business award. The woman also started to change how she thought about herself. Before, she measured her worth through reports, profits, and headlines. Now, she measured it through moments: reading bedtime stories, helping with homework, walking to the park holding her daughter's hand. She realized she had been blind for years, chasing recognition while missing out on the joy of being a mother. That realization didn't erase her pain, but it gave her strength to stand tall again. One evening, as she tucked her daughter into bed, the child asked, "Mommy, why do you smile more now?" She was quiet for a moment, touched by the innocence of the question. Then she whispered, "Because I finally see what's important." Her daughter hugged her tightly and fell asleep with a peaceful smile. That moment stayed with her like a gentle flame, reminding her to keep moving forward. Her visits to the mechanic's shop continued. Sometimes, it was for small repairs, sometimes, it was just to bring him tea or snacks as a gesture of thanks. She didn't understand why, but talking to him always left her calmer. He never asked about her past, never looked at her with pity, and never judged her. He spoke with honesty and simplicity, something she had missed in the world of boardrooms and deals. One afternoon, while waiting at the shop, she asked him, "Do you ever regret the life you have? Don't you ever wish for more?" He smiled faintly and replied, "I don't measure life by what I don't have. I look at what I do have. My work keeps me honest, and I sleep with peace in my heart. That's more than enough." His words touched her deeply. She realized that wisdom wasn't always found in books or universities. It could come from a man with oil-stained hands who understood the value of peace. She carried his words home and reflected on them. For years, she had chased more success, more recognition, more wealth. But she had never felt truly at peace. Now, with less than she ever had, she was slowly learning what it meant to be content. Still, there were nights when fear returned. Sometimes, she lay awake worrying about the future, about money, about her daughter's education, about her own ability to keep going. The weight of her past failures didn't vanish completely. But each time, she would remember the mechanic's words and her daughter's smile, and she would remind herself that she was not as empty as she once believed. One particularly difficult evening, when bills piled up and her small projects seemed uncertain, she almost gave in to despair again. She sat at the kitchen table, her head in her hands, tears blurring her vision. Her daughter walked in quietly, carrying a blanket. Without saying a word, the child wrapped the blanket around her mother's shoulders and whispered, "Don't cry, Mommy. I'm here." Those words shook her more than anything else. She pulled her daughter into her arms and cried, but this time, they were not just tears of sorrow. They were tears of gratitude. The mechanic had been right. As long as she had her daughter, she had not lost everything. She still had love, she still had purpose, and she still had someone who believed in her even when she didn't believe in herself. From that day forward, she stopped saying, "I lost everything." Instead, she began saying, "I still have her." The shift in words changed the way she lived. She no longer looked at her life as broken, but as something being rebuilt different, smaller maybe, but more real. The mechanic's presence continued to guide her in silent ways. Whenever life felt too heavy, she would think of his calm voice and his simple wisdom. She often wondered why a stranger cared enough to remind her of what truly mattered, but perhaps that was the beauty of life. Sometimes the right words come from the most unexpected places. Her daughter noticed all these changes too. The little girl became more cheerful, more confident, because she could feel her mother's love more clearly now. They began creating new traditions together: Saturday walks to the park, Friday movie nights at home with popcorn, Sunday mornings cooking pancakes. These traditions were simple, but they filled their hearts with joy. The woman often thought back to the night in the repair shop. If her car hadn't broken down, if she hadn't cried in front of a stranger, she might still be drowning in regret. But fate had placed her in that moment, and one sentence had turned her life around. She realized that sometimes, life breaks us only to help us see what we have been ignoring. She knew her journey was not over. There were still struggles ahead, still uncertain days. But now she faced them differently. She no longer saw herself as a fallen CEO, but as a mother who was learning to live again. She was no longer defined by her failures, but by the love she carried in her heart. Her story was no longer about losing everything, it was about finding what was always there. And though she didn't know what the future held, she knew she was strong enough to face it. As long as she remembered the truth the mechanic had given her, she still had her. Time passed, and with each passing day she found herself changing in ways she had never imagined. The woman who once thought her value lived in boardrooms and business titles was now discovering strength in everyday life. The mornings no longer felt heavy. She woke with purpose, not because of meetings or deadlines, but because her daughter was waiting with a smile and hope in her eyes. That hope gave her more energy than coffee ever had during her corporate days. Her small projects started to grow little by little. At first, she had only a few clients, mostly people who remembered her from her past work. But soon, word spread. People realized she was not just skilled but also honest, reliable, and deeply human. She wasn't chasing glory anymore, she was serving with heart. And strangely, that made her work more meaningful than when she had been at the top of a powerful company. She wasn't building an empire this time, she was building trust, one person at a time. Her daughter became her biggest cheerleader. Every time she brought home even a small success, the little girl would clap her hands and say, "I'm proud of you, Mommy." Those simple words filled her with joy no award could ever match. She realized then that her daughter didn't care about titles or wealth, she only cared about love, presence, and the security of knowing her mother was there. That realization healed wounds money could never touch. Her connection with the mechanic also continued in quiet ways. She didn't see him as often as before, but whenever she did, he greeted her with the same calm kindness. He never acted like a savior or tried to take credit for the change in her life. He simply carried on with his work, fixing cars and speaking wisdom through ordinary words. That humility taught her something powerful: greatness wasn't about being known by the world, but about touching even one life with truth and sincerity. One afternoon, after dropping her daughter at school, she drove past the tall building where her company once stood. She stopped her car and looked up at it. The glass windows shone in the sun, and busy people hurried in and out. For a moment, her chest tightened with memories of late nights, of decisions that shaped futures, of power that once belonged to her. But instead of sadness, she felt calm. She no longer longed for that life. She whispered to herself, "That was my past, not my future." With a deep breath, she drove away, smiling softly. Her daughter grew more curious as well. One evening, the little girl asked, "Mommy, why did you cry that night at the car shop?" The woman paused, remembering the night her walls crumbled. She didn't want to burden her child with all the painful details, but she wanted to be honest. She said gently, "I thought I had lost everything, but then someone reminded me that I still had you. And that changed everything." Her daughter hugged her tightly and whispered, "I'll always be with you." In that moment, the woman realized she had not just rebuilt her life, she had built a bond stronger than anything she had before. The small house that once felt empty was now full of life. Its creaky floors echoed with laughter, its modest walls held priceless memories, and its kitchen smelled of shared meals and warmth. It was not a mansion, but it was a home. And for her, it was more than enough. She often thought back to the night of her breakdown at the repair shop. The mechanic's words had been short, but they carried the weight of truth. "You still have her." That single sentence had been a turning point, a seed planted in her heart that grew into courage, hope, and love. Without it, she might still have been drowning in sorrow, blind to the blessing that sat beside her every day. One day, she returned to the shop, not for repairs, but to express her gratitude properly. She found the mechanic under a car, his hands blackened with grease. She waited until he finished, then handed him a small box. Inside was a simple gift, a notebook and a pen, wrapped carefully. He looked puzzled, and she explained, "This is to remind you that your words matter. You may not know it, but you gave me back my life." He smiled quietly, not used to grand thanks. "I only told you what you already knew," he replied. She shook her head softly. "No. Sometimes we need someone else to remind us of what really matters. And you did that for me." His eyes softened, but he said nothing more, as if he knew that silence carried its own kind of wisdom. From that day, she carried a sense of peace that never left her. Life was still full of challenges. There were still bills, still uncertainties, still struggles she had to face. But now, she no longer faced them as a broken woman. She faced them as a mother with purpose, as a survivor with lessons, and as a woman who understood the true meaning of wealth. Wealth was not the cars, the houses, or the power. Wealth was the laughter of her daughter, the quiet wisdom of a stranger, and the strength to stand after falling. She finally understood that losing everything had not been the end, it had been the beginning of a better story. Years later, when her daughter grew older, she would tell her the story of that night at the repair shop. She would describe how she felt lost and how one simple sentence changed her life. And she would remind her daughter, "No matter what you lose in life, remember to see what you still have. That is where your strength will always be." Her journey was not about being a CEO who fell from power. It was about being a woman who discovered that true power came from love, not titles. It was about being a mother who realized that her greatest success was not her company, but her child's smile. And it was about a mechanic who, without knowing, gave her back the courage to live. She never forgot his words. Whenever life grew heavy, whenever fear tried to return, she would repeat them in her heart, "You still have her." Those words became her anchor, her reminder that no matter how much the world takes away, as long as love remains, nothing is truly lost. And so, the woman who once believed she had lost everything walked into the future not as a fallen CEO, but as a mother, a fighter, and a soul who finally understood the beauty of life.